joining me now to put the big day into perspective and to forecast what might be ahead is Congressman Mike Johnson from the 4th Congressional District of Louisiana. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee and, as I mentioned, also chairman of the Republican Study Committee. Mike, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you as always.
Well, big day on Capitol Hill as really in many ways just almost a flipping. Republicans in the last Congress having 236 members, the Democrats 196 now. Today, the Democrats have 235, the Republicans 199. What do you make of Nancy Pelosi retaking the gavel? What are you anticipating in the next 2 years?
We anticipate stormy seas ahead. I mean, I think it's correct that many people have forecast that, the next 2 years could present some of the greatest challenges we faced in the 242-year history of our country. We have divided government. We have a bitter partisan divide in so many ways, and it's not a it doesn't look good for the next couple of years. Now, what we're going to do, though, Tony, as conservatives in the House, is we look at this as an unprecedented opportunity. We have a real responsibility. We think that we might have what could be the most important moment in the history of our group, the Republican Study Committee, which is the largest caucus of conservatives in Congress, as you know, to provide a steady voice and the intellectual firepower that we really need to defend and advance our core conservative principles. They will be under assault under the Pelosi-led House, and we're gearing up to be ready for that.
Let's talk about some of those assaults. First off, in order to move forward with any legislative initiatives, you have to adopt rules. What do we make of the rules package that the Democrats put forward today?
Well, they've made some changes. Most notably is sort of a protective measure that the newly elected speaker has put in place to further protect herself and her office. It's more difficult to remove the speaker now. They made some procedural changes. They put in some other bells and whistles that will, from their perspective, make it easier for them to move legislation. We expected some of this. Some of it is window dressing for appearances only, but they are going to try to run the table. They've made no bones about that. They basically have two agendas going forward for the next 2 years. One is to make President Donald Trump's life as miserable as possible with endless investigations of all of his personal affairs, his business affairs, his family, and everything else. And number two, to try to roll back many of the great strides that we made in the 115th Congress, the one that we just concluded. We had a remarkable run in the first 2 years of the Trump administration with the Republican-led House and Senate, and now they are determined to try to unwind some of the great strides that we made. So we have an important role to play on defense to try to hold that line. But we're not just going to wander in the wilderness and play defense, Tony. We're going to play offense as well. And in the RSC, the Republican Study Committee, what we're really gearing up to do is to become a real policy shop for the next 2 years to put together our ideas, to implement our conservative values in terms of policy and what that looks like in legislation, move all of that we can, but more realistically prepare a package, a playbook, so to speak, so that we can run and be prepared to run when we take back the majority in 2 years, which I think I have some confidence that we'll do.
Two of those issues that you brought up I want to talk about because they tried to kind of put a lid on talk about impeachment during the election, but today that has bubbled back up to be, looks like, a top priority for the Democrats to pursue impeachment of Donald Trump.
It is, and it was noted that Speaker Pelosi said today in an interview or sometime this morning that even the indictment of the president may not be off the table. That's still up for discussion, I think, is what she said. Look, there's no secret that probably a majority of the Democrat caucus in the House, at least, would love to impeach the president. The only thing holding them back is the political calculation right now. They're going to place a lot of emphasis on what the Mueller investigation concludes or comes out with, which we expect perhaps in February, early March. And I think they'll make an ultimate decision at that point. If there is an impeachment proceeding, it will come through the committee that I serve on, the House Judiciary Committee, as a first stop, and we're gearing up for that. I think people can say a lot of things about the president, but I don't think we've not seen any evidence at all that he's come anywhere close to any impeachable offense. So it will be an important philosophical battle, an important political battle, and one that I think will unnecessarily divide the country even further, and that's unfortunate.
You're listening to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Tony Perkins. Glad to have you along on this Thursday afternoon. Mike Johnson, my guest. Big day on Capitol Hill, the 116th Congress getting underway. Mike, you talked about some of the advancements, and I know that a lot of people would have liked to have seen more, including yourself and me, in the 115th Congress. But a lot was accomplished. We've talked about that over the last couple of years. But one area that we've seen advancements when you look at both what Congress did and what the president did was on the issue of pro-life, the sanctity of human life, the reestablishing of the Mexico City, which the president did, actually expanding it beyond what Ronald Reagan had. Nancy Pelosi and crew have their crosshairs on those pro-life measures, not only wanting to just eliminate what was done in the last 2 years, but really go back 4 decades and force taxpayer funding of abortion.
They do, and that's one of the first battles that we'll have right out of the blocks here. They've made no bones about it. I think part of the problem that Pelosi has is that she has to respond to the increasingly radical fringe left element in her party, and there's this new sort of rabid progressive movement. It's a charge to the left that's being led by some of the incoming freshmen and some of the others, and they're going to do their best to push the Democrats all the way off the cliff, I think, from our perspective. So on the pro-life measures, on the defense of religious liberty, on the defense of so much of what most Americans hold dear. I mean, you look at the principles that have made us the greatest nation in the history of the world: devotion to God, individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law and fiscal responsibility and free markets, all these things, human dignity and the sanctity of every human life. All of that is in jeopardy right now. Now, thankfully, we'll have a bulwark. We'll have a stop in the Senate. And, of course, the president wouldn't sign any of that nonsense into law if it came to his desk anyway. But we're going to have a real battle in the House, and I think the American people need to be paying attention, because this is a bellwether of what's to come. Politics is downstream from culture, and this is what we're seeing right now.
I never, of course, in the last couple of years, we never thought we would be talking about the Senate being the conservative backstop in Washington, D.C.
Right.
But it's exactly what it is. And Mitch McConnell, I think, is poised to do that. I think we've added some new, really good members to the Senate, like Josh Hawley from Missouri. But what do our listeners need to be doing? I mean, let's talk about that for a few minutes. What do they need to be doing to be prepared? Because we're talking about some very fundamental things: the sanctity of human life, religious liberty, those things that this administration, by inch has been able to advance. Nancy Pelosi is going to try to undo that and more.
She will, and I think that what concerned citizens, what Christians, what people who believe in these ideals that you and I articulate all the time, what they need to be doing is being very engaged. It should be a standard course of action to call your representatives in Congress, no matter what district you live in. They need to hear from you. You need to be engaged. You need to be involved on the local level, on the state level, and watching what's happening with politics and policy there in your own backyard. We have an obligation. We have a responsibility as citizens in the country, also for Christians as citizens of the kingdom. And if we're not engaged, then we're derelict in our duty. These are the kinds of things that happen. We say all the time, elections have consequences. When we're not engaged, people are elected who do not share those American values, and they're pushing some other value. That's what we're facing right now, and we got to be very involved.